So adding physics through putting a rigid body on an imported model. We're going to work through an example with Google Blocks. This is a Gopher model. Poly by Google is the creator of this one. In Simmetri, if you press Shift, Control, and P, a search box will come up for Google Poly. And if you go ahead and type in Gopher, you'll find the one that I'm working with here. Oh, there's another interesting Gopher over there. I think this one's kind of cool. It's taking a little while to load, but when it loads, you're going to want to press download and hit, oh, there it is. You're going to download the OBJ, and you can import then under File, Import Optimized. Import Optimized, you're going to bring in the .obj, and that'll work on a Google Poly model, even if it's unzipped. So you can you could go straight to Gopher in the zip. This is what yours might look like. I always name my Google Poly models when I download them. The model name followed by some underscores, and then the creator name, so that you can attribute them for Creative Commons. So I'm going to bring in this zip file of Gopher PBG, and you'll actually see this Gopher pop in here. It's the same as these. We've got the Gopher in here, but you'll see that the ones that I brought in and added rigid bodies to act physically, right? They fly and land and bounce and collide and everything. Whereas this one that I just brought in just floats in the air, and nothing collides with him. So it's sort of this kind of a ghost model in a sense, right? There's nothing really. So what you want to do to make these characters physical is first get them to the size that you want them. So using scale, pressing R, come over to the scale tool, either press R, W, move, E, rotate, R, scale. You can scale this guy, get him to the scale that you want before adding the rigid body, because that'll then kind of lock in the shape, in essence, the shape and scale that this rigid body will be added in. So we'll make this one much bigger. And so once you've got it to the scale that you want, select it, and then up in its properties, right? So you've selected it, up in its properties on the top level representation of it here. Come to this little triangle, and you're going to add the rigid body attribute. This little button is kind of a gateway to all the different kind of magical things you can add onto an object. One of them is physics. So we're going to add this rigid body, and as soon as we press play, you'll see this guy fall. And now he'll fall and slide. You'll notice something that's interesting here. He kind of slid along as if he's bottom heavy, and indeed he is. This character came in with its what's called pivot point, or its pivot being set to the bottom. So it's like basically it's 0 point. Its origin, in essence, is down here at its base, and that then becomes the rigid body's like center of mass. And so you'll see that this guy does not want to tip over. In fact, if I rotate him, he'll come right back up, and that may not actually match his actual center of mass. And so I'll teach you one little trick to properly position that center of mass. And the way to do that is, while selected on the model, we're going to go to Mesh Model, and then we're going to go to, or actually, excuse me, we're going to remove the rigid body, and we're going to be placing it back on after we get our pivot in the right place. So we're going to do a little thing called a Mesh Modifier, which is a variety of things we can do to kind of change the way that we're interested in this mesh data. So what we're going to do is, on this character, when we've selected it, ensure that there's no rigid body. You've removed that. And you can do this in the first step. Under Mesh Modifiers, if Vertex Transform is not there, you're going to add one called Vertex Transform. And Vertex Transform is actually just saying, changing kind of all the data of all the vertices that are in this model and saying, oh, let's base them off of a different center point. And so what we're going to actually do is move all these vertices down relative to this center point, and basically put that center point in where we think the center of mass is for this this character, which I would assume is somewhere in its midsection here, near its belly. Anyway, so we're just going to basically move it straight down, and to do that, under the properties, under the Mesh Modifier and Vertex Transform, expand out Transform, and on position, we're basically going to pull it down on the Y direction. And when we do, we'll start to see that that center node stays in his center with respect to kind of his left and right, but we're going to start to move it, kind of center it relative. I'll bring it down just a little bit, bring the vertices down around it a little bit more. And now I like where that is, so I can collapse these and bring the character kind of back up a bit. And now when we go to add the rigid body, it's going to accept this as the center point of, this will be the center of mass. And so now we'll see that if I rotate him, he stays rotated, not like he's got lead weights on his bottom, on his lower feet, and it's not like, he's no longer bottom heavy. And when I throw him sideways, he kind of properly rotates, as you might expect. And you certainly have, it's interesting how adept we are kind of in understanding the way things should look with respect to their mass. We're extremely used to things having a center of mass judged, based off of its actual volume. So cool. That is adding rigid bodies and kind of tuning them to blocks models. I think what we'll do next is add some impulses to this character, and give you a sneak preview here. Put a physics impulse on this character, and then you crank it up until we actually get force on this character. There we go, getting there. We could also crank the character's mass down. Maybe we just type it in. There we go. That's an impulse happening one every second. And we'll teach that next.